got a lot to cover. Your introduction to Hamlet on 1237 or 1602 in the 10th edition begins, Hamlet, the most famous play in English literature. Obviously, that's not a fact. I mean, that is a value judgment on the part of your editor, because many would say King Lear is the most famous play in English literature. Anyways, just briefly talking about the rest of what your introduction mentions. Hamlet falls within the genre of revenge tragedy. Tragedy, but revenge tragedy, largely speaking, just like Midsummer Night's Dream is a comedy, more specifically, it's a romantic comedy. Okay? Revenge tragedies have some particular characteristics. They go back to, your text mentions Seneca, 1st century AD, Roman author who wrote a bunch of revenge tragedies. They involve a murder and obviously vengeance or revenge for that murder, okay? Usually in a revenge tragedy, you have multiple deaths that are the result of the person trying to exact the revenge. So, you know, I think it's safe, one could argue, are the multiple deaths necessary or required, or are they, the proverbial collateral damage? There's definitely in Hamlet collateral damage. There are people who did not need to die, who died, okay? For a variety of reasons, right? So there's familial revenge. Usually the person that is murdered at the beginning is avenged by a son, daughter, brother, husband, father, that kind of thing. And often you have ghosts involved, okay? The ghost of the dead person will be the one that speaks to a family member to ask them to require that individual to perform the act of vengeance. Your text mentions at the bottom of 1237, or towards the bottom of 1237, another Elizabethan revenge tragedy, Thomas Kyd's Spanish tragedy, okay? So Shakespeare is not, reviving this genre himself. There's another one by Christopher Marlowe, Chamberlain, also figures the same. This isn't Shakespeare's only revenge tragedy. Titus Andronicus is another one. Titus Andronicus ends with a lot more people dead than Hamlet. Hamlet, you end up with within the course of the play, 6 people die. Hold on. Eight people died, and 1, 2, 3, 4 of those are on the stage at the end of the play. I mean, you got 4 dead bodies on the stage at the end of the play. You go back to Seneca, and if I remember correctly, I'm not positive about this, I don't think any of the bodies are seen on the stage, because it still falls within that Greek notion of spectacle. You got to kill them kind of off stage. By the time we get to Shakespeare, people are getting their eyes plucked out, heads lopped off, everything on stage. Okay? So you've got a bit at the end of that page. Crime, madness, ghostly anguish, poison, overheard conversations, conspiracies, and a final scene littered with corpses. Hamlet subscribes to the basic ingredients of the formula. That almost, maybe leave out the ghostly anguish and stuff, but that sounds like most action movies today. I mean, you end up with all kinds of people dead. There's a lot of overheard conversations, etc., etc. The introduction goes on. But Hamlet transcends the conventions of revenge tragedy, because Hamlet contemplates not merely revenge, where'd it go? But suicide and the meaning of life. All of which is true. And did I have that? Yeah, Hamlet, not italicized, is referring to Hamlet, the character, contemplates these things. Hamlet, the play, does also. Said to my first class, I've said this for many, Hamlet's probably, the play, is probably the most theological and philosophical of all of Shakespeare's plays. I mean, he's just wrestling with a lot of major kind of religious ideas and issues, as well as philosophical issues, like, why are we here? Big Bang suggests we are here, and we got here in our own personal, experiences, beginning 14.6 billion years ago, something like that. What does the Big Bang not answer? The Big Bang theory as to the origins of the universe. What does it not answer?
What caused the Big Bang?
Why? Why did, boom, we don't know. Nobody knows. Somebody says they do, they're lying. Nobody knows. They know speculatively, because now some astronomers are starting to say, we're not so sure because of what the Webb telescope is showing us. But, it happened and everything kind of flows from that. So Hamlet's, both the character and the play are weighing these issues, right? So you could take all of this and kind of subsume it under, just the term religious. There's a lot of religious stuff packed into the play. We're actually going to see allusions to events that happened not too long before Shakespeare's life, within 100 years, for example, right? Things that deal with the Protestant Revolution, Protestant Reformation, that we'll talk about, And that breaks down into kind of two trains of thought: Catholic belief and Protestant/Calvinist belief. And we've talked a little bit about, in the Elizabethan period, Elizabeth was Protestant. Her sister, who was queen before her, was very staunch Catholic. She's the one from whom we get the name of a drink, vodka and tomato juice, Bloody Mary, because she killed Protestants. Not personally, she had other people do it. Burning them at the stake, beheading them, the whole 9 yards, all right? So you have this Catholic-Protestant tension in Shakespeare's day, in his lifetime, to the point where Elizabeth gets to the point where she's cutting out Catholics' tongues, she's executing Catholic priests, etc. So it all finds its way into Shakespeare's play, okay? One other comment. As I've said, for example, about Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare has sources for all of his plays. He doesn't just invent them entirely out of thin air. So the original source for the idea or the story of Hamlet comes from a, can't remember if he's Norwegian or Danish writer named Saxo Grammaticus, 13th, 14th century, right? Who writes the history of the Danes. In that, he refers to a character named Ambleth, who avenges his father's death. His father was killed by his, Ambleth's, uncle, father's brother, okay? Some of the sources drop the B and it's just Amleth, right? The film came out this summer, I think it was, called either The Northman or The Norseman, with Alexander Skarsgård playing the character of, it's all about getting revenge, etc. One other thing before we start looking at the play. There is a very, very famous, huge box office hit. Adaptation, no, not really adaptation, retelling of the Hamlet story, so to speak, done by Disney within the last 30 years. animated. Anybody know what it was?
The Lion King.
The Lion King. The Lion King is the story of Hamlet. You have Mufasa / Hamlet Sr., Simba / Hamlet, Scar / Claudius, gotta get the names, and Sarabi, I think that's her name, / Gertrude. And what happens? Scar is jealous of Mufasa, so he kills him. He kind of blames it on Hamlet. It's not blamed on Hamlet in the play, though. That's why I said it's a retelling. It's not an adaptation, okay? And everything doesn't fit perfectly, but it's the same basic story, okay? I don't want to say anything else about the rest of the introduction. Read the introduction, as brief as it is. It's pretty good. So, the dramatis personae. Notice Hamlet's written about, I'm pretty sure it's first performed in 1600, so Shakespeare might have started writing it even in 1599. First performed, I believe, in 1600. His son Hamnet died, it's either 1598 or 99. So, relatively soon. And Shakespeare, beginning 99 or so, he starts to write some darker stuff. You get this one, King Lear within a year, Macbeth, Othello, all within a couple of years. So we have our dramatis personae. Claudius, King of Denmark. Hamlet, son to the late king and nephew to the present king. What else isn't included in that little description of Hamlet in terms of relationships? So, son to the dead king, nephew to the current king. What else is he to the current king? We find out in the second scene. Stepson. So he's nephew and stepson to the current king. All right? And then we have Polonius, the Lord Chamberlain. And remember again, Lord Chamberlain is the second most powerful person. All right? Just like in Shakespeare's day, the Lord Chamberlain was the second most powerful person next to Queen Elizabeth. And at the time that this play is being written and performed, Shakespeare is still part of the Lord Chamberlain's men. All right? That's the name of the acting company. Horatio, a friend of Hamlet. Laertes, son of Polonius. You have a bunch of courtiers named, and then a bunch of other people who we're not going to discuss. Not right now. Gertrude, Ophelia, etc. So Act 1 begins, and we're told where. Elsinore. There's a platform before the castle. And that just means a platform out in front of the castle. It doesn't mean, that here's the castle, and there's a platform over here. No, it means here's the castle, and it's like there's a platform on part of the castle. A battlement, in other words. Okay? On the front of the castle. And Bernardo comes out with Francisco, and Bernardo says, "Who's there?" Okay? We're told they're sentinels. So what do sentinels do?
You watch.
They keep watch. Notice that second word. So what do you do when you keep watch? I know it sounds like a silly question, but you're doing what? You're watching, you're observing, you're looking, you're seeing. If a cop's on duty, what should the cop not be doing? Let's say you have two cops in a patrol car. What should they not be doing while on duty? Looking at Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc. Because what are they supposed to be doing? Their eyes are supposed to be out, right? They're supposed to be looking. They're literally supposed to be, brother-in-law's ex-cop, 27 years. You're supposed to be looking for criminals, for laws being broken. They're not supposed to drive around in their car, admiring the scenery or the view or whatever. So, Who's there? Looking, watching, observing. We get introduced to one of the first themes and one of the major themes of the entire play. Seeing, watching. Okay? We're going to hear someone describe Hamlet later on as the observed of all observers. Okay? Hamlet is a play about, in one sense, a theme in Hamlet is spying. Not legal, so to speak, not CIA, FBI kind of spying, NSA kind of spying. What kind of spying? What's another word for that that doesn't imply, espionage? Like neighbors sticking their nose where? In other people's business. This is what's going on throughout, seemingly, Elsinore and or all of Denmark. People are doing what? They're looking at what other people are doing. Okay? So, Bernardo, nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself. Long live the king, Bernardo. So when enter Bernardo and Francisco, two sentinels, are they coming out the same door at the same time? No. One comes out one door, one comes out the other door. And it's like Bernardo hears something. Who's there? He doesn't see him immediately. Okay? And Francisco, answer me. Stand. Unfold. That is, reveal yourself. How does he reveal himself? Long live the king. That's kind of code word for I support the king. So they talk back and forth. And Francisco says, Bernardo tells to Francisco, time's now struck 12, go off to bed. In other words, your shift has ended. My shift is now taking over. Francisco, for this relief, much thanks. Now, he could just mean, I'm tired. Maybe he's pulled the 12-hour shift. We don't know how long the shifts are. 'Tis bitter cold. We are talking northern Denmark on the coast of the Baltic Sea. And I am sick at heart. So I'm not only cold, sick at heart. Does it mean he's depressed? No. Lovesick? No. Something's troubling him. Something's bothering him. Have you had quiet guard? Has something disturbed your peace, and that's why you're sick at heart? Not a mouse stirring. That's where Samuel Clemens, by the way, gets the line for 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. It's from this. Good night. If you meet Horatio and Marcellus, bid them make haste. So, Bernardo says to Francisco, as you make your way back home or to the barracks or whatever, tell Horatio and Marcellus, get a move on. He doesn't want to be out there alone. I think I hear them. So they come in, and Francisco says, who's there? Okay, that's what Bernardo said earlier. So now Francisco, who is there? Friends to this ground. That is, we're used to this space. In liegemen to the Dane, and we are sworn to the king. So, who should be leaving? Francisco. So Francisco leaves. And 21, Marcellus asks Bernardo, has this thing appeared again tonight? I have seen nothing. How long has Bernardo been there? A minute? Maybe two? Horatio says, 'tis but our fantasy. Fantasy meaning, think Theseus's long speech about the four lovers' dream. What does fantasy/imagination do? Bodies forth the forms of things unknown. He says, we had a hallucination. We saw something that wasn't there. Top of the next page, 1240, line 24. And will not let belief take hold of him touching this dreaded sight, twice seen of us. Will not allow himself to believe what we told him we have seen. Therefore I have entreated him along with us to watch the minutes of this night, that if again this apparition come, he may approve our eyes and speak to it. What must Horatio have? What did the misfit complain about not having, not seeing? Anybody remember? He's talking with the grandmother just before he shoots her. They're talking about Jesus and raising people from the dead. He says Jesus threw everything off balance. And then what does he say? If I have been there, I know. But I wasn't there, so I don't know. Why? Because he can't believe. Distinction between belief and knowledge. All right? So, Marcellus is saying, we invited Horatio so that if this thing does appear, Horatio will what? Believe. Why will he believe? Because he will see. Seeing is believing, right? Only sometimes seeing isn't believing. Because sometimes I still can't believe what I saw. It's like it violates my understanding of how things work. It will not appear. Why? Why does Horatio say it won't appear? What does Horatio's mindset, what does Horatio's worldview preclude the possibility of? Let me ask you this, and this isn't a rhetorical question, this is a real question. How many of you believe in ghosts? The reality of ghosts. Nobody's raised their hand. I'm assuming that means none of you believes in ghosts. Assume for a moment, play along with my fantasy, that a ghost suddenly appears right here. Just whoosh, out of thin air. And there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 of you plus me, 13. And we all see it. Okay? So you don't believe in ghosts. You don't believe in the reality. You don't acknowledge that ghosts might, and I'm not saying they do, okay? Just play along with the fantasy. But one suddenly appears in your midst, and what do you do with that? How do you make sense of that? Do you suddenly believe? Some people would say, yeah, if it's there. Or do you go like Scrooge does, you're a piece of undigested beef, and I'm seeing things. One person, okay, but 13, all seeing the same thing. See, that's Hippolytus' response to Theseus' nice long speech. It will not appear. Why? His belief system doesn't allow it to. Bernardo, well, sit down and let us talk to you a bit. He says, okay, speak, Bernardo. And Bernardo says, last night of all, what's the of all? They've seen this twice. Not twice in the same night. It was like the night before and then last night. And he says, in fact, it was just as yon westward star, that same star that's westward from the pole, got to about that exact same place. And, oh, there it is. The ghost appears. The bell beating 1, So, midnight has already chimed, and now, seemingly, it's, an hour has passed. The bell then beating one, and the ghost comes back in. The ghost comes usually between midnight and 1 o'clock. Peace, break thee off. Look where it comes again. In the same figure, like the king that's dead. That is, it looks like the king that's dead. Marcellus, thou art a scholar. Speak to it, Horatio. And your gloss tells you, because Horatio is a scholar, which means he's attended university, he knows Latin. And your footnote goes on to say, therefore he can perform the rites of exorcism. Exorcisms were performed in Latin, which Horatio, as an educated man, would be able to speak. That's a stupid footnote. Who can perform exorcisms?
Priest.
A priest. Horatio is not a priest. Just because he speaks Latin doesn't mean he can perform an exorcism. All right? Priest falls into which branch? Catholic. Now you have Anglican priests. Okay? Anglican priests were not very big, even in Shakespeare's day, on the idea of exorcisms. They're not very big on that today. Exorcisms are still a pretty big deal in the Catholic Church. You have a whole society for exorcists. All right? Thou art a scholar, speak to it. I think who was it who said that? Marcellus. I think all Marcellus is saying is, you are well educated. You be the one to speak to it. And notice, it looks like what? It looks like the dead king. We're just soldiers. It's more kind of in your position, okay? Horatio, Bernardo says, looks not like the king? Mark it. Mark means notice. Horatio, most like. It harrows me with fear and wonder. Harrows, lacerates the feelings. Scares the bejeebies, is what that means. I have no idea why we get lacerates the feelings. So, Horatio addresses it. Line 46. What art thou that usurps this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? Why does he say it usurps the night? What do you do when you usurp something? You take something that doesn't belong to you. Not like robbery, okay? You take a position, you take a place that is not yours. What would happen today if Kamala Harris, gave a news conference and said, I am now the president of the United States because the former president was unable to fulfill his, and just did that on her own. What would be the problem? What is Kamala Harris's position? Vice president. Runner up to president, kind of. Waiting in line to be president, so to speak. Okay? The reason I said if she did that all on her own, that would be attempting to usurp the office of president. Now, it could be kind of totally different, a little bit off topic. She could do that, but only in one instance. Two instances. What are they? 25th Amendment, to be exact. 25th Amendment, if she gets a number, and there's a certain number of members, I think it's a majority, of the members of the cabinet to say the president's no longer able to fulfill his duties, she becomes president. Temporarily. Okay? I think Congress has to, House of Representatives have to agree with that. Okay? The other is if something happens to Biden, falls and goes into a coma or something, she would then become president temporarily, unless the president were no longer able ever to fulfill, So, that's usurping. So what he's implying is, you don't belong here, you ghost. Okay? Where does a ghost belong? Well, let's just talk about it from a religious perspective. One of two places. If the ghost is the spirit of the dead person, either in heaven or in hell, or maybe you want to be kind of more neutral, middle of the roady, in the grave kind of a thing. We're going to find out about ghosts, why they wander at night and such in a few moments. So, why do you usurp this time of night together that is in that fair and warlike form in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? And why do you look like the dead king? And not just the dead king dressed to the nines, but the dead king how? In full battle gear. I mean, he's got armor, he's probably got a shield, he's got a sword, whole 9 yards. By heaven, I charge thee. I command you by the name of God, so to speak. Speak. And Marcellus tells us it is offended. Why? What should happen between I charge thee speak and it is offended? Well, you get line 51, the ghost exits. See, between Horatio's speech and Marcellus's, the ghost turns and starts to leave. It goes away. How now, Horatio? Bernardo asks. In other words, what do you have to say now? You tremble and look pale. If it wasn't real, you wouldn't tremble and look pale, would you? I shouldn't go there. I was going to say, so I will go there. If all of you really didn't believe at all in ghosts, and one just right in the middle here appears, you know what I would probably be doing after class is going and getting a whole bunch of paper towels and cleaning up a bunch of messes, because it would probably so blow your minds. Is not this something more than fantasy? Isn't this more than a figment of our imaginations? Isn't this more than a dream? Because there's Marcellus, there's Bernardo, there's Horatio. 3 different people have seen this. And notice, the ghost responded to words. It didn't respond with words. What do you think? Before my God, I might not this believe. That is, I couldn't believe this without the sensible and true avouch of mine own eyes. Without the seeing. Okay? The sensible through the senses and true avouching. If you vouch for somebody, what do? You say they're trustworthy. You're giving them credit. You're giving them the benefit of the doubt. He's saying, I believe my eyes. All right? And yet, one of Shakespeare's favorite themes is the appearance of something versus the reality of something. That's why he uses the verb seems so much. Because sometimes things seem to be something, but they're not. Okay? Is it not, notice Marcellus's question, is it not like the king? Like the king is what kind of literary or poetic technique? It's a simile. It's a comparison. Isn't it similar to the king? Look at Horatio's response. as thou art to thyself. Well, how art Marcellus to himself? It's a stupid question, right? Because Marcellus is himself. So what is Horatio doing in his response? It's not like the king. That is the king. That's the dead king. Or the ghost, at least, of the dead king. And he goes on. And that's the very same armor he was wearing when he, the ambitious Norway, combated. Okay? Notice place names are taken to refer to individuals, and individuals are taken to refer to place names. So Norway is both the country of Norway and it's the king of Norway. Denmark is both the country of Denmark and the king of Denmark. Right? So little to clear up some possible confusion. You have for Denmark, Hamlet Sr. For Norway, Fortinbras Sr. And then I'm going to skip Claudius for a moment. And then you're going to have Hamlet Jr. And you're going to have Fortinbras, or Fortinbras if you want to pronounce it that way, Jr. All right? So he's talking here, Hamlet Sr. or Denmark defeated Fortinbras Sr. or Norway in single combat. Two countries went to war, and the king said, rather than slaughter everybody, you and I go out on the field, and whichever wins, that side wins. Okay? So, they keep talking, and Horatio says, line 69, this thing we just saw, it bodes some strange eruption to our state. What kind of natural event do we use that word today, eruption, for? What do we not want to see happen in Yellowstone? We don't want to see Yellowstone erupt. Why? According to geologists, when Yellowstone, the giant caldera that is Yellowstone National Park, it's like the northwest corner of Wyoming, part of Idaho, southwestern Montana. Pretty big place. When that erupts again, what's going to happen to a large bit of the United States? We won't be united and we won't be states anymore because we'll be covered in probably 4 to 5 feet of ash. That's what happened the last time it erupted 600,000 years or so ago. And it erupts apparently about every 600,000 years. So it's, clock's kind of ticking, okay? This eruption to our state, he's saying, or it portends some kind of eruption, problems are coming. Something's going to happen, okay? So, Marcellus says, sit down for a bit. Why are we out here on watch? Why are we observing what's going on that demands our presence out in front of the castle? So, Horatio says, I can tell you. And that's when he goes on and talks about Denmark killing Norway, getting a peace agreement as a result, peace treaty, so to speak. But what has now happened? Young Norway, young Fortinbras, wants what? What kind of tragedy is this? It's a revenge tragedy. He wants to revenge his father's death on all of Denmark. Well, who currently is Denmark, so to speak? Claudius. Okay? But the play isn't about the revenge tragedy of young Fortinbras against Claudius. So, he goes on, talks about all of that. Now young, 95, young Fortinbras of unimproved metal, hot and full, hath in the skirts of Norway here and there sharked up. So he's rabble-roused the country up to wage war against Denmark. That's why Claudius has ordered the troops on alert. Bernardo, I think you're right. Line 108. I think it be no other but e'en so. Well may it sort that this portentous figure. What's a portent? Is a portent a harbinger of good news? Like, Christmas is coming in a couple of months. Like when the angels sing to the shepherds in the field. The child is born, blah, blah, blah. That's good news. That's not portentous news. Here's a modern day, real world example of portentous news. I don't know if you keep an eye on the news. Anybody know what the Department of Health and Human Services submitted an order for in the last couple of days? I think it hit the news last night. $290 million worth of anti-radiation medicine. And it's not like anti-radiation medicine, you go and you get an x-ray or you have this CAT scan or something like that. And, so some stuff you have to take a medicine after some nuclear scans to make sure everything's fine. Not that. This is anti-radiation medicine specifically, like it has on the bottles, for in case of nuclear explosion, nuclear accident, like, a nuclear power plant exploding, or the, meltdown. Portentous. How? Where have we been hearing, the word nuclear in the news the last week or so? Well, President Putin of Russia has threatened to use them and has threatened to use tactical nukes. It's kind of got, a few important people in important positions of power a little bit concerned. Biden even last night in a speech to a Democratic fundraiser said, "We are the closest to nuclear Armageddon we have been since October 1962. I was alive in October 1962. I don't remember it because I was 9 months old, something like that. But there was the Cuban Missile Crisis when Russia parked about 90 nukes in Cuba. And Kennedy said, remove them, and we blockaded Cuba as Russian ships were coming to deliver more. And if Russia tried to run the blockade, guess what would have happened? More than likely, we wouldn't be here. I mean, it was like 5 minutes to boom, all right? That's why that order is portentous. It doesn't mean something horrendous will happen, but even a lot of people who are very, very level-headed kind of military pundits, like there's this one guy writes for the Wall Street Journal. He's very well known, very well respected, and his last couple of columns are all like, folks, you should be concerned, not bury your head in the sand, go out and buy a nuclear bunker kind of thing, but this is getting really dangerous, because where is Putin right now, militarily? What position are the Russians in?
They're weak.
They're backed up into a corner. What are the Russian forces doing in Ukraine? They are running. They are abandoning their equipment. And Russia has already, supposedly, according to Russia, annexed those 4 territories or provinces. So that now, according to the Russian frame of, let me rephrase it, according to Putin's frame of mind, Putin doesn't speak for all Russia. Thinks he does, but he, those 4 provinces of Ukraine are now Russian territory. So any attacks on those are, it'd be like if somebody attacked Guam. What is Guam to the United States?
Territory.
It's a territory. It's not a state, but it's a territory. It would be considered an attack on Russia, and Russia has written in its defense doctrine, an attack anywhere on Russia will be considered a full scale, and we will respond likewise. So, just, portentous. Well may it sort that this portentous figure comes armed through our watch, so like the king that was and is the question of these wars. So, Horatio, a mote it is to trouble the mind's eye. What kind of literary technique is it? It's written down here somewhere. It's an illusion. It's a biblical illusion. Christ is talking about judging others, and he says, take the beam out of your own eye before you attempt to do what? Take the mote, the speck of dust, out of somebody else's. But we're not talking about literal physical eyes, right? Because if you get a speck of dust in your eye, what do? You sit here and you rub it, if you're stupid, okay? Rather than splashing water, you do this. Or if you get a piece of sawdust in, and you rub it and you rub it and you rub it. So what does a speck of dust or piece of sawdust in the mind's eye do? It causes the mind to rub. It focuses the mind on itself, on that problem. Okay? Like I just probably spent too much time talking about the portentous and the Russia and, all that kind of stuff. Why? Because it kind of troubles my mind. I remember the Cold War very, very well. I mean, we did literally once a month duck and cover drills. Not because of earthquakes, even though we were in earthquake country. It was because Lockheed was 30 minutes away. And if there was going to be, and NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, same place, Moffett Field, where U-2 spy planes flew in and out of, 20 minutes away. If there was going to be a nuke, Silicon Valley would be gone. So, he goes on. And Horatio, talks about portents, kind of historically. And he mentions Julius Caesar. And it's almost like Shakespeare saying, see my play. Where we find out about all these portentous things, eclipses, shooting stars, etc., before Caesar was assassinated. And the ghost comes back in. And Horatio says, I'll cross it, though it blast me. Now look at your gloss. Cross, meet or face, thus bringing down the evil influence on the person who crosses it. Maybe. Huge maybe. Cross, remember, means I'm going to stand in its way. I'm going to keep it from going where it wants to go. Which is kind of weird, because if it's a ghost, what could it do? Go right through it, okay? The footnote is predicated on the assumption that the ghost is evil. Can there be a non-evil ghost? I mean, kind of in popular mythology, yes. The question is, in Shakespeare's day, could there be a quote-unquote good ghost? Well, that gets into these belief systems. Protestants would say, Shakespeare's day, there are no such thing as ghosts. When you're dead, you're dead. And your soul goes one of two places. Catholic belief system said at the time, there is the possibility of ghosts. Why? Because between heaven and hell, there's purgatory. And it was part of the popular mythology that some souls in purgatory could revisit Earth. In our popular mythology, whether you believe in ghosts or not, what do we sometimes hear is the reason for why ghosts exist? Why do they come back? Why does somebody not go on? Anybody?
They have unfinished business.
They have unfinished business. They got to do something. They have to right some wrong they've done, usually. Okay? So look at Horatio's words to the ghost. If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak to me. So, can you speak? If so, speak. If there be any good thing to be done, that may to thee do ease and grace to me, speak to me. So, if I can do any good thing for you, notice that will do thee ease. What is he suggesting is the possible state of the ghost? If the ghost needs to have ease done to it, if the ghost needs to be made easy, at peace, then it's presently what? Ill at ease. It's not at peace. There's some problem. But notice it's not just that. It's or do grace to me. Okay? Excuse me. And do grace to me. That's a Catholic idea. Because what does he suggest? In one sense, it's a Catholic idea. Because what does he suggest? If I can do some good work for you, that good work will therefore do what for me? It will draw down the grace of God. Protestants don't believe that. Shakespeare's day, they didn't believe that. Protestants, Shakespeare's day, said, all you need is faith. And we're going to talk on Wednesday. We're probably going to have to spend a few minutes and get into a bunch of theological stuff. Okay? Specifically, Protestant Calvinist belief system. So, speak to me. So, first, if you can speak, speak. Second, if I can help you, and my helping you will bring grace to me, speak. Third, if thou art privy to thy country's fate, which happily for knowing may avoid, speak. If you know what's going to happen, and you can tell us so that it is avoided, speak. Or, fourth one, if thou hast abhorred in thy life extorted treasure in the womb of earth, for which they say you spirits oft walk in death, speak. If in life you literally buried treasure, and that's why you ghosts, it is said, walk in life, speak. What kind of treasure? Extorted. If you have ill-gotten gains, if you have wealth that shouldn't be yours, and that's why you're roaming the earth, speak. What's Horatio suggesting will be done with that wealth? Is he going to take it and put it in his bank? No. What's the purpose of wealth? It's an interesting question. I kind of think it's for what? To fatten my stock account, to fatten my bank account, to make my life better. But if you go back, in English literature and in kind of early Christian literature, the purpose of wealth is really one reason. It's to help others. It's not to build up your own, it's to share. So he's suggesting, tell me and I'll spread the wealth. Okay? Cock crows, the ghost leaves. So they talk about what the crowing of the cock means and why the ghost had to leave. And Horatio essentially says the ghost had to go back to where it belongs, whether that's purgatory, hell, the grave, something like that. Scene 2. No, we'll just stop. We'll pick up with scene 2 on Wednesday. Remember, there is a quiz, I believe, due tonight. And I won't put up another quiz before Wednesday. So we'll finish Act 1. Well, we'll attempt to finish Act 1 on Wednesday. Have a good break. Remember, no class.